Okay, so welcome everyone. We'll go ahead and start. So it's a very simple title, but with profound meaning and gravity. Today's session is ADB's commitment to a just transition and Paris alignment, and we are testing that word commitment through the different speakers and their perspectives. We have folks who are joining in online, and just a few house rules. This particular session is also being video documented by the ADB. Folks who do not want to have their picture taken, kindly inform the organizers at the back. And if you have given your consent, kindly be explicit about that as well. For any questions, those who are online can type into the Zoom chat box. Our colleagues will bring those questions to my attention, and once we have time later on, we will address them. As I mentioned to you earlier, Head of Energy Department, Priyanta Vijayatunga, will probably be not with us throughout the entire session. He will be leaving a little bit earlier. So for those of you who want to ask questions to the ADB management, you can relay that to us and we will make sure they receive these questions after the session. So without further ado, a few words need to be said. We are amid an energy crisis globally. We have seen the consequences of being locked into fossil fuels. If we had transitioned a decade earlier, we would probably not be facing the long lines for oil and gas all across the region. We are also looking at a new pressure on critical minerals. We've just heard from the ADB, it has lifted its ban on nuclear financing as well. So a lot of these solutions which are coming in the name of energy are hotly debated across various perspectives, not only in civil society and bank, but also in academe and along with other development experts as well. So bringing that debate into this session, we want to hear perspectives from civil society. First and foremost, I would like to call upon our colleague online, Mr. JB Garganera, who's the national coordinator of Alianza Tigol-Mina, which is a group which is working on advocacy on extractives. So JB, if you can hear me, this is your cue. You can go ahead and start. JB?
Thank you, Ryan. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to Director Priyanta. Thank you for giving this opportunity to make some reflection points. ADB commitment to a just transition. It's a loaded title, but let me first give three elements that we feel are pillars for a genuine commitment to a just transition. First, an energy and minerals policy that will explicitly operationalize a do no harm approach. And this can only be achieved if ADB loans and policy grants clearly avoid funding projects that will result in sacrifice zones or potentially introduce or prolong suffering of affected peoples. Right now, this commitment does not seem to be clearly embedded in any of the policies that we are discussing or implementing. Second, policy grants must recognize the new realities of the other commitments to other multilateral agreements and environmental conventions. That should be guiding principles for minerals management and energy transition. If the ADB is supporting the crafting of new mining laws or mineral strategy roadmaps that fail to strengthen transparency and accountability in the minerals value chain, or if these policy grants fail to address or recognize the beneficial ownership of political dynasties owning extractive projects, this will not deliver a just transition for the rural poor, but will only facilitate the power grabs of oligarchs and in fact promote colonialism. Third, a meaningful just transition can only happen if the ESG guidelines and safeguards policies of ADB are genuinely and comprehensively implemented. In the event that ADB safeguard policies are reconciled with the safeguards policy of other IFIs, we run the risk that the least ambitious or least progressive set of safeguard policies will be implemented. And this is a setback that will erode the promise of a just transition. Now, let me cite some examples, just to the way that those 3 points might all be rhetoric. But here are some concrete examples from our ongoing campaigns. Some trends that we have observed in the past few months. First, the Indonesian experience of resource nationalism in the nickel industry has resulted in the decrease of global nickel prices. The Chinese investments and offtake agreements on processed nickel has been so efficient that the supply of nickel is in a surplus, and the Middle East war has reduced the demand for nickel. And so Indonesia wants to control nickel production to support its price. Now, this this resource nationalism and agreements with China came at a huge price of environmental destruction and social unrest. We must also be mindful that the demand for nickel will drop, potentially within the decade, if lithium iron phosphate batteries or LFP batteries will be adopted as the global standard for electronic vehicles. So clearly, the Indonesian example of how they develop the nickel industry is not a just transition, and we should not be copying that model. Second, our group, Alianza Tigil Mina, has co-published with several international groups reports on the negative impacts of expanded nickel mining in the Philippines. And these impacts include human rights abuses and violations of environmental and local autonomy laws. At the same time, we have seen an escalation of community resistance against these destructive projects, which has put more human rights defenders at risk because of red tagging, legal harassments and slap suits, violent dispersals, and even illegal arrests. These same trends are being observed in Indonesia and in the Mekong region. Although the different commodities being mined there, we see the same results. Now, these two examples are not the kind of transitions we want. And if the ADB does not properly address of defining clearly its investment and priorities on extractives, particularly in transition and critical minerals across the region, then we might see a worsening situation on human rights implicating extractive projects. Clearly, the suffering of affected peoples will increase if this transition policy is not done properly. Finally, we hope that the ADB and the energy policy team is conscious about the potential impacts of Pax Silica and the critical minerals agreements that have been recently aggressively promoted by the Trump administration. If the ADB is engaging on both these platforms, let me raise a very basic point. The word transition does not appear in the signed critical minerals agreement. Now, a disclaimer, these critical agreements are not publicly available. And but I've seen it. My government will probably disavow this, but I've seen a critical minerals signed critical minerals agreement, and the word transition does not appear there. So if Pac Silica and the critical minerals agreement do not even recognize the operational term of transition, then we are in much trouble. The other major concern is that these agreements might be creating another platform where the minerals value chain is being controlled by a superpower, in this case, the United States, and leaving very little room for actual industrialization targets of developing countries to benefit from our own mineral resources. Pac Silica and the critical minerals agreements are the latest form of green colonialism that is forcing communities, and particularly indigenous peoples, to surrender access and control of their natural resources to respond to the defense and security needs of superpowers, and not necessarily towards delivering the commitments of a Paris alignment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, JB. And those were very important points. I'll come back around to it before going to Priyanta. Next, I'll call upon Mr. Hemanta Wetanage, Senior Advisor for Center Environmental Justice and also IC Convener of the NGO Forum on ADB. Hemanta will touch upon the challenges in just transition in Sri Lanka broadly and the role of the ADB. So, Hemanta, over to you. Can the microphone be switched on for Hemanta, please?
Thank you very much. I come from Sri Lanka. I would consider my country is one of the energy confused country because we are not anymore reaching to the energy sovereignty or energy security, and we have many issues. If I remember last year, the whole country got blackout. They say because a monkey jumped into the transformer. So this kind of unstable energy system we have. Now, under the nationally determined contribution, so we are supposed to reduce 33.9% electricity GHG emission by the electricity sector while keeping 70% renewable energy. Right now, because of the war in one hand, and also there was a coal scam in the country. And because of the two reasons, at least we burned 2 billion rupees worth oil, diesel every day. It's important to understand why this is happening. One is actually starting end of last year, Sri Lanka has imported coal. We have a coal power plant which was established since 2012. And every year you can unload coal only 6 months because there's no coal unloading facility. It's only the barges they use. But suddenly when they unload coal this time, they found the very first shipment is very low quality. Calorific value is low, high ash as much as 21% to 25%. Sulfur level is very high, nitrogen level is very high, and it has shown in all other shipments, and this become a heavily criticized issue, and very recently the Minister of Energy had to resign. And also the Auditor General's Department has made a report on what we have lost. It comes to about 8.4 billion Sri Lankan rupees lost because of the poor quality coal, which comes from South Africa. Now, we realize that it's not only high ash, high sulfur, but also it's a low quality, and the low quality coal normally have mercury, high levels of mercury, but unfortunately, Sri Lanka doesn't need mercury as one of the parameters when they import coal. Apparently, 2018, we tested the mercury levels of the hair samples of the women in childbirth age, like up to 40, 45, 46. And we found about 15 parts per million mercury in their hair samples, which is very, very high compared to the WHO standard. Now, which means it's very sure that we have been using high mercury coal in Sri Lanka, but this time it's not only the high mercury, but is the whole low quality. And because of that, 900 megawatt coal power plant can produce around 800 megawatt, and every day we have to generate power close to 80 megawatt or sometimes 100 megawatt using diesel. And this has actually increased the use of thermal power from 5% originally both Silonil, the government-owned monopoly, as well as the private producers, from 5% to about 15%. So that is, again, using a lot of diesel and burning a lot of diesel. The meantime, Sri Lanka has an LNG power plant, and this so-called LNG power plant was built during the COVID time. But unfortunately, we don't have a LNG terminal. So therefore, they are burning diesel. But they always, when they mention this particular power plant, they say it's a LNG power plant. It's LNG ready, but actually they are really burning very expensive diesel in this power plant. So the generation of greenhouse gases are very high all these times. Now, right now we have another environmental impact assessment to build another LNG power plant, though we don't have a LNG even terminal here. And the ADB supported rooftop solar at some point, but unfortunately, we were not able to reach get the best result because we don't have a battery storage system. And right now, we generate, and the people generate almost like 1,000 megawatt, but unfortunately, most of the time, they ask us to shut down our rooftop solar. Especially, they can easily shut down the ground-mounted large solar, but the rooftop solar, they cannot control because our system is not ready for accepting this kind of community solar in Sri Lanka. So the result is actually now they are showing that by 2044, they want to have another 600 megawatt nuclear power plant. Now, if the ADB support was all this time, since from the very beginning, ADB has supported Sri Lanka for about 12,650 million US dollars. Out of that money, about 1,800 million has gone into the US dollar million has gone into the energy sector. Now, this is out of 522 projects, 57 projects in the energy sector, but still Sri Lanka is not capable. They are not energy sovereign, energy secure country. Now, my question is now, if in the case ADB failed so many years, so many decades of supporting with their policy advice, technical assistance, and the project funding, how can they support Sri Lanka to become an energy sovereign and respect into the Paris obligations as a country? If this is the case in Sri Lanka, I believe many of the developing member countries of ADB has the same problem. So I think this is something that ADB has to critically think, and whether their policy push, whether their funding actually has brought anything to meet the Paris obligations in those countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanta. A round of applause for Amanta. So we've looked at critical minerals, and now we've looked at a borrowing DMC scenario where we're looking broadly at the energy mix and ADB's influence. Moving on to new territories and new alarming territories, which is nuclear power. I would go to Marita Luft, energy campaigner of Urgewald. Marita, over to you.
Thank you. So we're in the midst of a climate crisis. And now on top of that, we're also in the midst of a global energy crisis. And for both of these debates, nuclear power has been propped up as a solution. But let me tell you now, 3 out of probably 100 reasons why nuclear power will not solve any of these crises, however often it is presented as such. Because there's so much misinformation and so many false promises around this technology. So, first of all, nuclear power has never been economically viable without subsidies. On average, nuclear power costs 5 times as much as renewable alternatives. And the final costs end up exceeding the original estimates by multiples. Also, construction times end up being much longer, usually twice as long or 3 times as long as originally promised. And these are not just like isolated failures of some nuclear plants. This pattern is consistent throughout all nuclear plants that are being built or under construction. And this is time and money we simply cannot afford in the face of a climate crisis. Second, the promises of small modular reactors are a lie. When we calculate per energy output, SMRs, small modular reactors, are even more expensive than regular nuclear reactors. The Australia's Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organization just showed that SMRs are by far the most expensive way to generate electricity. The nuclear industry has made these promises of shorter construction times and cheaper energy generation for decades. Let us not be fooled by the same promises yet again. And thirdly, instead of decreasing dependencies, nuclear energy creates them. Nuclear power projects deepen financial dependencies, increase sovereign debt, and lock countries into long-term fuel contracts and technology relationships. All of this money that is currently burned because of inflated fuel prices will then simply go to pay off sovereign debt and uranium supply. And it will also create dependencies on just a very few number of countries that are in the nuclear industry, and most probably on Russia. Russia controls most of the export market of nuclear industry. 90% of the nuclear reactors that are being exported are funded by Russia. And Russia also controls 40% of the uranium enrichment capacities. In all of the cases, nuclear energy is used for geopolitical dependencies and influence. So this is exactly the opposite of what we want when we are talking about energy sovereignty. And it will definitely not solve the current energy crisis. So our energy must be safe, reliable, and independent. Nuclear energy fails to deliver on any of these points. But there are solutions. Just imagine that while building one nuclear power plant, we could build 5 to 7 times as much renewable energy solutions in just a third of the time. So, but now to maybe give the ADB some credit, they are saying just because they can, under the new energy policy, they can finance nuclear, but we've heard that they are not planning to just simply consult on nuclear energy. So my question now would be, when consulting on nuclear energy, are these facts taken into consideration? And I'm not talking about the false promises of the nuclear industry, but I'm talking about the actual costs, the actual risks associated, the times it takes to build a nuclear plant, and the long-term problem it creates. Because I think we all agree that if the ADB just consults on it and do the only rational way and consults member countries to not invest into nuclear power, we are kind of happy with that. But yeah, that would be my question later to Priyanka. Thank you.
Thank you, Marita. So nuclear power, the way we hear it from the bank, we always hear optimistic views about the benefits of nuclear power. And we tend to hear very little about the risks because they try to sell you the benefits over the risks, right? Our job as civil society is to bring up the risks on the same even keel. Saying that, let's see what actually happened in Japan. We're joined online by Mr. Yuki Tanabe, Program Director of JAXIS, who's going to walk us through the Fukushima nuclear reactor in Japan and what went wrong with it. So a real life example. Yuki, if you can hear us, over to you.
Thank you. Today, I'd like to provide lessons from the Fukushima nuclear accident in 2011, and I'd like to show why ADB support for the nuclear sector is unrealistic and unreasonable. First, I would like to discuss the evacuation of residents. The next, please. Next. Okay. I'd like to discuss the evacuation of residents at the accident. On the night of March 11, the Japanese government initially issued an evacuation order for a 3-kilometer radius. However, the next morning, the order was extended to a 10-kilometer radius, and in the evening, it was extended again to a 20-kilometer radius. And then in April, as radiation levels in each area gradually became clear, it was discovered that the strong wind had created area within the high radiation level in the northwest region, as the map shows. And then the evacuation zone had extended to a 30-kilometer, and evacuation order also issued for the northwest region towards the 40-kilometer. Official statistics indicate that up to 160,000 people were evacuated. However, there are no statistics on those who voluntarily evacuated outside the designated evacuation zone, and the citizens group estimate the total number of the evacuees to be over 200,000 people. Next, please. Secondly, regarding the impact of this accident, officially only 2 power plant workers have been reported as direct deaths from the accident. However, more than 2,000 people died related causes due to the disruption of their livelihood and the stress caused by the evacuation. For example, at the time of the accident, the largest hospital in the region had 338 patients, but all of the hospital infrastructure shut down, resulting the death of 39 patients. Health surveys have been done in Fukushima from 2011 to the present, and more than 300 causes of thyroid cancer have been reported, but the Japanese government has not acknowledged a link to the nuclear accident. Next, please. Thirdly, the recovery will take an extremely long time. 15 years have been passed since the accident, yet 300 square kilometer remain as an evacuation zone, and more than 20,000 people are still unable to return to their hometown. Normally, nuclear power plants are decommissioned over 50 years after shutdown, but in the case of Fukushima plants, because of the nuclear fuels have melted down, long-term decommission work for the several centuries will be needed. So in conclusion, considering the scale and the duration of this nuclear accident, I have serious doubt about whether realistic evacuation plans can be established in various Asian countries, and whether meaningful consultations can be held with such a large nuclear number of affected people. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yuki. I mean, I was just thinking about the morning session. If ADB cannot deliver safeguards for an urban reconstruction development project in Mongolia, how on earth is it going to deal with a nuclear power plant, right? And you can't make a mistake twice on nuclear. You get it wrong once, you get it wrong forever. So I do not want to put further pressure on Priyanta, but just a quick reminder on the first speaker so that we don't miss out on critical issues. On critical minerals mining, nickel versus lithium debate, the oligarchs and what they play, the role they play in extractivism, red tagging, which the activists are facing, and this PAC Silica, which is looking at military and defense spending versus just transition. So that's just a quick reminder for the first speaker, and over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you. First of all, let me thank all of you for inviting me for this panel discussion. The second, raising all these issues. Of course, only 4 issues raised out of many I'm sure you have, right? And I'll try to quickly, answer more in a more generic and a broader way, because probably to go into details, you need specific project officers here, which of course I cannot really do at this stage. But as Ryan quite rightly said, if you have more detailed, specific focus questions, please feel free to send it to us, and we will make sure that these are addressed. When starting from the beginning, overall, as you know, ADB has not been engaged in the critical mineral sector, particularly mining sector, for the last 2 decades. This is the first time after 2 decades we are trying to open it up, for very good reasons. As you know, it's like, if you really need the energy transition, you need the critical minerals. And so they are so much interlinked and strongly coupled. And also we have to make sure that these, critical mineral supply chains are diversified enough so that your supply security is ensured. And you know what has happened with the current, crisis in the Middle East, when the world is relying so much on the oil coming from Hormuz Strait, what has happened, and the price of oil and so on. So the diversification of supply chains is very important, and enhancing these supply chains is also as important for the energy transition. That's the very reason ADB went into opening it up and came up with the directions paper and the approach paper. So broadly, that's our intention. The intentions are good. Then when it comes to actual implementation, we are going to chip in our interventions for policy support, institutional support, regulatory support, and on safeguards. All these things we will be supporting, along with investments, of course. And when it comes to investments, naturally, all these investments will have to follow strict safeguard policies, energy policy, and everything else we have. Of course, you may raise a question that these policies are on paper and how much you really adhere to it in reality. But of course, all of us, like you, I'm also part of the society, and I would like to see the best thing for the society. So I do my best within ADB. I'm sure Bruce Dunn will do his best within ADB to make sure that these policies are adhered to. So there is only so much you can do. And at the same time, the borrowing countries also will have to do their part. So from our side, what we can do is it's a carrot and stick approach. We have to make sure that they follow the necessary safeguard policies and other policies of ADB to the best of their own populations, and we can push them to accept the policies and regulations or come up with policies and regulations along with it. So that's what we can do from our side. I assure you we do it. We do it through our policy-based loans when it comes to policies and regulations and all the other things what we need to do with the governments. And so on top of that, keep in mind, over the years, in the recent years, we have in fact increased our policy-based lending as against project-based lending. One of the reasons is because of this. We have to make sure that the real policies and regulations are in place for these governments to move forward in this. Coming down to Sri Lanka specific case, I agree with you. I am a Sri Lankan, by the way, so Hemanta knows very well where I stand, and I agree. And Sri Lanka is only one example, and most of our developing member countries are energy confused, because a lot of other factors come in, not just the energy sector or climate related ideas and interventions, but many other political interventions come in. So from our side, what we are trying our best is to minimize that. How do we do that? Now, for instance, as I said, we have come back to supporting policy-based loans. Through policy-based loans, we are trying to bring these governments to adhere to the best practices. For instance, in the case of Sri Lanka, we have a ongoing policy-based loan. There are 3 areas. First and foremost is structural reforms in the sector, which is very necessary at the moment because it's the government dominated single integrated vertically integrated utility, which still they have, which is a major issue as it stands, and it's being now restructured. The second area is renewable energy, and in fact we have brought in a lot of policy conditions to improve renewable energy expansion and deployment, and to address any grid and other related ancillary services issues along with it. The third, financial sustainability. As you know, it's very important that these utilities which handle the sector have financial health. It does not mean they should have a lot of money made out of nothing, but at the same time they should recover their costs, and the cost should be optimal cost. So we are trying to push them to do their planning in such a way that their systems are optimally designed, not suboptimal. Of course, it may be just on paper, but we are trying our best to do that, and try to reflect the tariffs to reflect the cost so that they have adequate financing to expand the systems. So one would ask then what happens to the people who cannot pay? Obviously, we are pushing the tariff reforms also to make sure such populations are looked after, but at the same time, there is nothing called a free lunch. Somebody will have to pay for it, and that will have to be therefore looked after by cost recovery methods. And so this is what we are trying to do. We may not have succeeded 100%, but we have succeeded quite a lot in these countries. And to tell you, in Sri Lanka too, we have done a lot in transmission distribution investments. And without us, probably Sri Lanka may not have achieved 100% electrification, within a short period of time. We have put in a lot of money on electrification itself. And obviously, people like Hemantha have really helped to make it right, to get the projects right. And so on nuclear, in fact, it's part of our, new revision which came out last year, ended last year. In fact, that is the major revision. The other three revisions are more to do with, tweaking the language to help or clarify certain things, and also to, bring down methane emission reductions in the upstream oil and gas sector. But this is the biggest revision which we brought in. In fact, we always, identify nuclear as an important technology option. It's a technology option. Keep that in mind. In the pool of technologies which you can consider for certain countries, it does not mean that nuclear is the solution for any country A or country B. It's up to the countries to look at it and see whether it's economically viable, it's realistic in terms of the land area, the population density, where it can be located, and so on and so forth. So from our side, what we said was, okay, we are ready to look at it if the countries want it. At the same time, if these countries are committed to international standards, the best practices, the best of the technologies available, and so on and so forth. As you know very well, we have now linked up with the IAEA. In fact, in the nuclear space, we will rely on IAEA, International Atomic Energy Authority, completely to move forward in the nuclear space. And at the moment, what we are looking at is mostly capacity development in these countries, if the countries really decide to move ahead with nuclear. Because as you know, unlike any other technology, as you quite rightly pointed out, it's a very risky generation technology. And you need to seriously take into account the capacity within the country, human resource capacity, the policy, regulatory institutions, institutional capacity. All these things will have to come together first before we really move ahead with an investment in nuclear. So that's what we are looking at with IAEA at the moment. Whether you like to hear it or not, we looked at IAEA list of countries, ADB member countries who are interested in nuclear. You wouldn't believe there are 15 odd countries who are either pre-phase 1 or within phase 1 phase in nuclear development. In my own country, as he quite rightly said, is interested in nuclear. I don't know how they are going to move ahead with it, but therefore we have to be very careful and we have to be part of it. And within that discussion, it's good to have, we are part of the discussion. If we are not going to be part of the discussion, the things may be even worse. So we want to be part of that discussion and make sure they get it right if they really want to move ahead with it. I don't think all these 15 countries will eventually get nuclear power at all. Because if you consider the 19 infrastructure issues, which IEA would like every country to look at and move ahead with before they really embark in the final investment, I don't think most of these countries can fulfill those 19 infrastructure issues. So that's how we are planning to move ahead with nuclear, if at all, if we are going to invest in nuclear. Now that will take a while. And as I said, our investments, our emphasis is going to be on mainly developing capacity to handle, if at all, if they're going to have nuclear in their power generation systems. Let me stop there, Ryan. Unfortunately, I have to go now because there is a press briefing which I have to be part of. Anything else I can handle anytime because I am here for the next 3 days.
Fantastic. A round of applause to Priyanta for having 10 whole minutes. Just one final word from our side. When things are moving so fast, you must slow down. You must slow down because you make the wrong move, this wave is going to take you in the wrong direction. But we'll leave him to his next meeting and we'll come back to our next speakers. Thank you. Thank you, Priyanta. All right, moving on with the proceedings, I will call upon our colleague Marjorie Pamintuan, advisor from Recourse, to talk about capital market investments by the ADB in the energy space. Marjorie, over to you.
All right. Thank you so much for inviting me, and good afternoon to all. So, May 5 is Private Sector Day, and in a couple of minutes, I will say why this is very important. And during that Private Sector Day, there will for sure be discussions about mobilizing private sector investment, de-risking investments, enabling policy environment, incentives, partnerships with the bank and government on development projects and including in energy. I think what will be missing on these discussions, including the discussion on critical minerals earlier in the morning, are about ADB's accountability and the commitments with regards to climate, Paris alignment, and better safeguarding and transparency. And this is very concerning because all of these commitments on climate, on aligning the bank's investments to the goals of the Paris Agreement, these can be trumped by the bank's secrecy that it has with its private sector investments. According to the bank's access to information policy, information can be withheld if it is considered as proprietary and as confidential business information. We have a new environment, the bank, not we, the bank, the Asian Development Bank has a new environmental and social framework, which has stronger provisions with regards to transparency, including on its financial intermediary investments. It also has a bit better protection for climate and also for biodiversity. Unfortunately, because of the bank's secrecy with the financial intermediary projects, which are private sector investments, these can be trumped by that secrecy. FI lending is already notoriously opaque. It is notoriously not disclosing a lot of information, including sub-projects. ADB's FI lending is estimated to have quadrupled over the last 10 years from around 542 million in 2016 to around 2.1 billion in 2025. And that's a lot. And yet over this period of time, 98% of these investments did not disclose what they are funding. We have also seen cases of withholding not only what these projects are, but also redacting important information, such as Paris alignment information assessment. So how are we to know if these private sector investments are aligned with the Paris alignment if that information is withheld, and even gender assessments. This opaqueness hides the fact that FI lending can lead to indirect financing of fossil fuels. Our recent research on Clifford Capital in which ADB invested $95 million in 2020, shows that this FI client has been and still making new projects, making new investments in fossil gas and oil, including in upstream projects, not only in Asia Pacific, but also in Latin America. We did ask ADB for commitments. Unfortunately, Priyanka is not here anymore. And ADB responded that only 3 projects were gas projects, use ADB proceeds from Clifford Investments. And also that since the ADB and Clifford assigned this agreement in 2020, before the 2025 ESF and before the 2021 energy policy, the old SPS and the old energy policies apply. There is a lot to be said on this, but let me highlight 2 points. One is proof that FIs can indeed channel financing to fossil fuels, and the other one is more concerning. It is the non-application of the new ESF. This means that the improvements on the ADB's commitments to transparency, improvements on safeguarding for climate and biodiversity, they will not be applied by Clifford Investments in its new investments starting 2025. Added with the lack of transparency, this makes it way much worse for determining if the ADB is really meeting its climate commitments, its safeguarding commitments, and it's way, way much worse for affected communities when harm does come to them. So in sum, private sector financing or mobilizing financing for energy investments and even any other development projects carries a lot of environmental and social risks. The bank's commitment to just transition and Paris alignment are endangered without strict enforcement of transparency and implementation of stronger safeguards, including those on climate and biodiversity. We have a few sets of recommendations. First is reviewing the access to information policy and revise the list of exceptions for public disclosure and making the public interest override mandatory. IFC is already reviewing its own access to information policy along with the sustainability framework. It is time for the ADB to also do that. Second is for the ADB to work with their FI clients to ensure that their clients are applying the new environmental and social framework. And third is work with their FI clients to phase out fossil fuels throughout of their portfolio. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Marge. If we don't know which way the money is going, we wouldn't know which companies are getting involved. And I think that entire business of financial architecture disclosure in private financing, equity financing, and blended finance is a question which civil society should continue to ask in the just transition space. I'll move over to my colleague Nazareth Del Pilar, who's the Just Transition Officer of the NGO Forum, who will be joining online to bring us up to speed on the energy policy, which has just recently been updated by the ADB in the perspective of just transition. Naz, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Good day. And thanks, Ryan, and everyone for grounding us with the ongoing realities and what it means to the communities, our national context, and our advocacy. I was actually given the hard task to consolidate our collective reflections from the energy policy review, but I just wanted to start off by highlighting again that we are in a deep energy crisis brought about by the war in the West Asia. Of course, leaving most of the countries in the global south grappling not only in terms of energy security, but also of economic, social, and climate change survival. No? But on a broader picture, this geopolitical crisis has revealed a much more embedded problem, no, which is the dangerous dependence on fossil fuels. And this also reminded us of the recently concluded energy policy review of the bank. No, and we saw this as actually as an opportunity to pick up from what was left unresolved in the 2021 energy policy review, and from all the engagements that we have we had, we constantly reiterated the need to close all the loopholes in the policy that continue to enable fossil fuels such as coal, oil, and gas, and also on fossil energy solutions, which my colleagues already mentioned. But unfortunately, critical gaps remained in the policy. I think first off on fossil gas is still basically labeled a transition fuel, no, with no sunset provision or no clear path as to how it would be phased out. No? And along the lines, we raised the issue of the Rupsha 800 megawatt LNG project in Bangladesh, which ADB has funded. No? And despite billions of dollars of investments, the plant continue to operate at only 3 to 10% capacity, no, which technically is a textbook stranded asset, no, and this is also while locking Bangladesh into a high carbon pathway dependent on imported fossil fuels. And I think this should be a lesson learned for the bank that if ADB continues to support gas infrastructure across its DMCs or developing member countries, then it could mean financing as well, no carbon lock-in, financing for stranded assets, and of course, financing long-term vulnerability for the countries that can actually least afford it. And second, of course, on the oil trading support, it was not explicitly seized under the policy. And in the midst of this crisis that we have, recently ADB was able to reactivate all trade transactions under its trade and supply chain finance program. No? And the question is, how would the bank move away from fossil fuels when it seemingly reinforced this dependence at the time of crisis? And a third on coal, I think gaps enabling both indirect and direct and indirect financing have persisted after the coal ban, no? And we're not adequately addressed in the last year's midterm review either. And as a specific case, we raised the Jamshoro coal plant, a 660 megawatt coal-fired power plant in Pakistan, where continued disbursement from ADB were observed after the even after the 2021 energy policy, which directly contradicts the bank's own commitments of no new coal financing. And given the massive environmental and social impacts of financing and operating this plant, ADB, of course, has failed to uphold the do no harm principle and technically its own safeguards policy. And maybe another one that which we continue to raise over and over again is about the energy transition mechanism. So, and we last year we actually expected these to be addressed in the midterm review, but instead it was initially proposed to expand its scope to oil and gas, without responding to the concerns we've raised, and on how ETM particularly moved away from its original goal of early retirement and instead shifting toward asset repurposing using quote unquote transition technologies like co-firing and fuel switching, such as in the case of the Philippines, Indonesia, and Kazakhstan pilots. And at the same time, ETM processes. We also raised that about the lack of transparency and meaningful engagement. And I think my colleagues already have already underscored the dangers of fossil energy solutions like of nuclear and the encroachment of the bank into the extractives through CN2 set. And again, with ADB as a major MDB financing for this particular energy project, profit remains to be the priority, which leaves DMCs with little to no option for sustainable and rice-based pathways for energy. At the same time, we are also concerned about the low climate ambition of the bank. When we raise these concerns to the bank management and the board, we were told that it was simply not the intention of the policy to be aligned or to be 1.5 dependent, or 1.5 aligned, and that it was only ever intended to be Paris aligned. But in practice, this means anchoring to the 2 degrees Celsius target that science has already told us is deeply inadequate. And I think going to this, the 1.5C climate objective is not a nego piece anymore because it is already we are already in a survival threshold. No? And with the current trajectory of the bank, no, it is actually positioning itself at the crossroads, no, and reiterating that we are actually living through the converging crisis. We have the geopolitical war, we have the climate emergency, and on top of that, the debt crisis that all bearing down the most vulnerable countries. And I think concluding that failing to address these gaps in the energy financing and as well as the recently concluded energy policy review uh, means failing not to respond to the ongoing energy and climate challenges. And I think from our position, a just transition will not be possible if ADB would remain on this path. No? And I think to end, we in the region need to transition towards a people-centered renewable energy future, as mentioned by by many colleagues earlier. And realistically, this should not be a mere technology shift, but it should be embedded in the needs of the communities, of the workers, and the vulnerable sectors. And again, we call on ADB to close all these gaps and reject all direct and indirect financing for fossil fuels and to stop deepening this crisis. I think I'll stop there and over to you, Ryan. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Naz. Well, that concludes the inputs from civil society. A round of applause for all the speakers. Now, just transition and this entire energy crisis, I think it's on everybody's shoulders. Looking at the time, we can take some thoughts and comments. Just to remind you, I do not work for the ADB and none of the speakers. So what we can do is we can collect your thoughts and reflections, and our advocacy with the ADB continues in the energy sector. I think we will meet them again in headquarters in a month's time. Happy to carry some critical questions from here as well. Many of you came a very long way into this meeting. And just to let you know, this meeting is being recorded and documented by the ADB. So if you are raising questions, it is a part of the formal process. So we're opening the floor. Does anybody want to share any thoughts and comments? Please go ahead. Kindly introduce yourself for documentation. Yeah. 1, 2, 3. Can you pass the microphone to the lady? Thank you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Tolikan Ismailova from Berdino, Kyrgyzstan, Human Rights Movement. And of course, we are now in Central Asia, beautiful Samarkand, beautiful Sencha. And it's a lot of people talk only about history and diversity. This includes various risks of disasters as a legacy of the Soviet occupation of resources. I am from Kyrgyzstan, and my friend from Tajikistan. In Kyrgyzstan, we have 92 uranium facilities. And one of them includes in the list of the most dangerous places in the world. This is a city, Mailusu. And Russian dominate and propaganda and influence, negative influence for civil society. And that's why I have questions for Marie, dear Marie, and for others also. What are key lessons from past of Asian Development Bank, say, civil society? I want to know from you, and key recommendation for them, because if they continue project without any lessons, we will die, because Afghanistan influence, Syria's influence, Iranian and Iran influence, and others. And a lot of country, for example, USA and European, focus for Central Asia now, focus only for resource. And of course, we understood if they continue this policy, it means investor became more rich and people died. And what is the key lessons and what is the key recommendation? I want to know. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The lady in blue, I think you had your hand raised. Did you want to ask something? Could we get a microphone here, please? Thank you.
Добрый день всем. Меня зовут Людмила. Я из Казахстана, город Алматы. Общественное объединение, микрорайон Ервинсай. Все вы знаете, что Казахстан отказался от ядерного испытания, закрыли ядерный полигон, но, тем не менее, значит, у нас собираются строить 3 атомные электростанции. И мне бы хотелось услышать, как мы, гражданское общество, можем бороться с этим. Потому что вот сегодня представитель из Германии, она сказала, что от ядерных, значит, этих атомных, скажем так, станций больше вреда, чем пользы. Мы правильно поняли?
Thank you. I'll ask my colleagues from CE Bank Watch to help me out here and our colleagues to translate.
I will not do a direct translation, just summarize. Sorry, I missed your name, but in Kazakhstan, there are plans for the constructing of the 3 nuclear power plants. And the question was, are there any advices from the panel, what the Kazakh organizations can do about it?
Thank you. Thank
Correct?
you, Petro. There was one question on your left here. I see you, Eugene.
Thank you so much for organizing this panel. My name is Birmet Borubaeva, Bishkek Smoke Initiative. We also have a lot of issues with the just transition with ADB because they gave $50 million loan to government for energy transit from diesel, like from fossil fuels to electric in public transport. But in the end, we have now replacement of electric transport to electric and to gas, actually from Russia, with a huge amount and actually with 20 times more expensive. And it's actually carbonization of urban transport with ADB money, and 600 workers don't have any income now, and people with disabilities cannot access public transportation now. So it's terrible situation, and we, for the 2 years, trying to reach ADB management, and nothing is happening. And ADB is vision as a the biggest climate bank in the region, and we do not have any clue why it's a climate bank, because they use climate money and destroying electric transportation. Now it's a UN decade for sustainable transportation, and we have all of these in our region, in our countries, and they put us in a police office. They pressure on us. They do everything to shut us down. So how we can resist together, and how we can actually make these climate fundings accountable and monitor it together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we've been fighting that greenwashing agenda for a long time, and we'll fight it with you, I think. Eugene? So after Eugene's intervention, I'll go back to the panelists for a minute for their closing inputs. Eugene, over to you.
I feel that we have a pattern here, which we need to discuss in relation to ADB. When the new wave of large hydro emerged, they said, oh, yes, we will have to go with the flow. Yes, it's disastrous, but we sort of middle-level world ADB officials have no decision-making power, so we will go with the flow, and ever since resisted any attempts of meaningful dialogue. It's been 5 years ago. Now, as nuclear emerged, they say, yeah, so many countries want to go nuclear. And yes, we hope that not all of them will be nuclear, but we will assist, because if we do not assist, it will be even worse. So we have a clear pattern. We have to understand, and I mean, it could continue. So when cannibalism becomes the actual good food production strategy, and several countries, members decide to go with cannibalism, with good sustainable food production based on excess population, they will have to go with the flow.
Thank you, Eugene. At that point, I think on cannibalism, I hope it doesn't get there, but you know, the way the world is going, yeah. Right. I'll draw the attention of those online. Is JB still online, Jen? JB, do you want to come in for a minute with
Sure.
some words? Yeah.
Yeah, well, taking off from Eugene's intervention, I think we need to be reminded. We appreciate Priyanta's presence in these kinds of forum, but this requires a different set of multiple approach pressures to the bank. I think Marge intervention is very, very crucial. We might be addressing a small part of bank policy and investments when we talk about public loans and the investments of the bank to our national governments. On the other hand, we are totally not happy, and we should be registering to the bank all the rollbacks that they are presenting to us on extractives, on transparency and accountability. I'm not happy with the response on pack silica and critical minerals. And this to me was a surprise, because I would have expected the ADB to be more robust support on pack silica and the critical minerals agreement, just to make sure that the AIIB in China doesn't corner all the critical and transition minerals, which China has been very effective. But yeah, looking forward to contributing to more advocacy when we all see Priyanta and the other ADB officials here in HQ in about a month's time. But good work there, forum members and partners. Don't let up with your pressure there with the ADB. Thank you.
Thanks, JB. I'll follow the same order as we came in. So Hemanta, few words.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there were several questions asking what kind of recommendations you can make. I think when we have seen the ADB development this next year, it will be 60 years now. 6 decades they have done this kind of development, but it's still many of our countries are suffering from poverty, because poverty is the overarching issue for the Asian Development Bank. But poverty is one of the biggest issue in many of our countries, and we are not benefiting from the so-called development in many of the countries. So the way we have engaged with the Asian Development Bank is bringing the critical social and environmental harms to the attention of the ADB, various levels, to the board, management, and even at the national level, we bring those issues. I think we should continue to do this thing. And I mean, in general, we know how this development paradigm is impacting the poor people more, and how the rich people are benefiting. But when it comes to the social and environmental safeguard, we also should keep bringing those kind of issues, should keep fighting. I think finally we should make the voice as the local communities, locally impacted communities. I think that's the way forward for us to continue to bring. But in order to do that, we have different policies in the Asian Development Bank. In the morning, we discuss about the safeguard policies, and under the safeguard policy, if your safeguard policies are violated, then you can bring that kind of complaint to the Asian Development Bank. I think maybe my advice to the new people who are not doing the ADB advocacy in the last couple of decades, I think so we should get together, and you can learn from those who are following the bank for last few years. But I think there are certain things that we as the communities cannot fight. When a nuclear power plant comes to your local community, I think we need the support, not only the own community, but the bigger support from the region, bigger support from the world. Now, we have been advocating the Asian Development Bank not to accept the nuclear power support to nuclear power plant, but unfortunately, because of the pressure from certain countries, the ADB accepted. Now they are open to support the nuclear power plant. So now, which means that they opened the floodgate already, and some people, some countries will go ahead with this one. And we already saw what is the damage in Fukushima, and we know what has happened in Chernobyl. I think that's the local experience we have. I think we have to keep reminding these decision makers that if you do this kind of thing, you have to take the responsibility, and you should be accountable for the damage you are going to bring. I think they cannot excuse, they cannot wash their hand after they approve this money. I think we have to keep reminding that our collective efforts, our unity, our solidarity is the most important if you are fighting against these kind of powerhouses. I think that's the most important message I want to bring here. I think if you want to learn more about how do you fight in different levels, we have the CE Bank coach in this part. We have the NGO Forum on Asian Development. We have other networks in this room. So please talk to them and learn more about how you can fight on the ADB, World Bank, AIIB, or any other banks development projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Hemanta. Marietta?
Yeah, I can just second what Hemanta was just saying. So I think we just need to keep up, like, just because it's in the policy now, it doesn't mean the ADB, like, I think it's coming, but it doesn't mean they have to finance nuclear energy. So I think we just need to continue pushing back against it, and as many people as possible, like telling the energy sector department, but also telling the EDs. And just to remind ourselves, it wasn't like it's now presented as, oh, everyone decided it, but it wasn't a decision as clear, like Germany and Austria voted against it, but then also a lot of other countries were also critical. So we need to remind them to continue being critical of nuclear energy. And then I think by Priyanka, by saying, oh, we are just giving everything to the IAEA, it's just another move to push away the responsibility that the bank actually has. It's like, oh, we're co-financing, so we don't have responsibility. Now we give it to another agency, so we don't have responsibility. So we need to remind them, no, if they are financing, they have the responsibility. And then just the last point, because I made this point about Russia dominating the export industry, and the ADB is actually, Russia is not a member country, so they are not allowed to work together with Russian companies. And this is difficult. Like, this is hardly possible, because like now in Germany we see that there is a place being built, and there's a French company, but actually it's a joint venture with Russia again, like a nuclear uranium company. So we need to look at that and be like, it'll, like, this is, I think, another path where we can push back and be like, you are actually not allowed to do that if you're going into the nuclear realm. So these were my reflections. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Marietta. Online, Marge, before I go to you, Yuki, did you have anything to add further?
Yeah, most of the people already discussed that, but there is one question, how to stop the nuclear power plant in Kazakhstan. And I'm not sure, there are many ways, but one of the key strategy is watching the financial flow, not only ADB, but also other banks and other shareholders, other investors. So we continue ask them, challenge them not to support this project, such a human rights violation. So that's the key strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Yuki. Marge?
Thank you. The last time I read, the ADB still stands for Asian Development Bank and not the Asian Private Sector Bank, no? But joking aside, I think the ADB should reclaim, or I think the ADB, if it wants to really boost private sector investments, if it really wants to improve its financial intermediary investments and promote that, it should match that same energy with equal boosting of the implementation of its commitments to stronger safeguarding for not only for the climate, not only for the biodiversity, but also for transparency and, of course, the rights of those people who will be affected by the ADB's private sector investments, including through its financial intermediaries. The theme of this annual meeting, I think it's called ADB at the Crossroads, and yes, it's fitting because of its location here in Samarkand. And I think the ADB is at its crossroads right now. Should it follow its same path of continuing these investments that are harmful to people, that can harm the rights and the environment of the communities that will be affected? Or will it choose another path that will improve its commitments, or that will actually enable it to uphold its commitments to stronger safeguards so that we can meet our goals on the Paris alignment and also phase out fossil fuels in its own portfolio? So thank you so much for all.
Thank you, Marge. Going online to Naz.
I think everybody else knows mentioned what is needed to be said. But I think just to reiterate that the forum and its allies remain unequivocal in the demands against these energy priorities of the bank that we've seen on trend and their policy trajectory in the next few years. And I think this crisis revealed that fluctuating fossil fuel prices, their supply chain disruptions, and there are geopolitical instability, and this underscores that ADB should not be fueling this further, by maintaining this status quo in terms of their energy financing. No, and I think for to end on this is not only the avenue for engagement. We are also looking forward for the upcoming Asia Clean Energy Forum in June in Manila, and hoping that we can all get together to that important space, where we can raise about this energy and just transition concerns. I think that's it, Ryan. Thank you.
Thank you, Naz. Just a few last words before we close it off. And this is just observation and not so much about energy transition. You have to understand that these panels, these sessions in the annual governors meeting, we have been planning this for the last 6-7 months. Who's going to speak? How much time is going to be spent? Who the ADB reactor is going to be? What the venue is going to be? There have been planning meetings which go by almost 10 or 11 planning meetings online in different time zones. Why does the management have to leave early? Why does it in the safeguards panel that all the cases are said and then management comes in to say a few words? Why does the management not sit in the court of public opinion and listen to the people? I will stop here and NGO Center will say a few words.
As you know, the situation is that we're coming very far from the Philippines to here. It took us a long time to get here. I'm so jet lagged. So the distance is far, the cost is high, so not very many staff are here. So not many management is here. From my department alone, only 4 people. So it's very difficult to get here and it's challenging. So we actually offered online to meet with our people. And we also have discussed with some of you for after the annual meeting to have calls and meetings. And as usual at the Asia Clean Energy Forum, we will also have sessions with civil society, and civil society can come anytime to the Philippines. And I work very hard as part of the NGO and Civil Society Center. I'm Heidi Ear-Dupree, head of ADB's NGO and Civil Society Center. We got this amazing space for you, and we welcome everybody. We have 200 plus here in person. We have close to 400 online. We have Zoom session. We've been promoting it like crazy. We want to hear people, whether it's virtually or in person. If you can't travel, we make the online available. We're doing everything we can. So we really think that it's very difficult for our colleagues. Last year, the Safeguard team had 4 people attending the meeting in Milan. This year, we have Bruce by himself. So, you know, Bruce can't be everywhere. So it's very difficult. So he had to split his time. Priyanta, I think he's probably the only one from his team as well. So it's very difficult for us, just as for you, to come all the way here. I know some of your colleagues are not here as well, due to cost, due to distance. So I think this is some consideration we have to take into mind instead of just saying, you know, ADB this, ADB that, right? Because over the years, ADB's been doing quite a bit to accommodate civil society and to actually make room for civil society. The Clean Energy Forum, as Nas mentioned, will be another opportunities. And then in September, our team is organizing another event for civil society in Manila, where it's easier for some of you to get to because it's in the region, right? So we will have onlines and different events and different sessions. So please let us know if you think that there are other ways to reach civil society and get civil society voices. That's really important to us. And our Safeguard team are really, you know, out there. The energy team are also willing. I know that many of you had been meeting with the energy transition team for many years, and there's been regular meetings as well. So I think they're keen on that still. The critical minerals team is also keen to continue the engagement. And my colleagues will be available. I mean, we know that online is easy, and some of you had already come to meet us in Manila. So yeah, welcome. This is something that it's actually due to circumstances that they could not be in many places because there's few of us here. So thank you.
A round of applause to Heidi, and they've been exceptionally gone out of their way to help us at the NGO Forum. No complaints with the NGO Center. A round of applause to all of you in attendance who have been patient and you've contributed for all your insights, and have a great few meetings ahead. I think whatever Heidi said, I want to believe. I will end there. Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a good one.